Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
Welcome to another edition of the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in these critical times. I'm your host, Bill Kelly. We promised you that we were going to do a little analysis of the 5 proposals in Prime Minister Carney's major projects initiative. Now, this goes back, of course, to the legislation that he proposed and presented to the House and was passed by the House, to their credit, just before they went off on their summer break. And he said, this is what we want to do. We want to build things, large things. He talked about investments as opposed to just government spending. And there's an important distinction to be made there. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 5 things that are being proposed right now, because he's come up with the first 5 and said this is not the end of it, by the way, and we want to be clear about that. That there are, just because it didn't make the first 5 doesn't mean these aren't projects that aren't going to happen. We'll give you some clarity on that in just a little bit. But it's I think a stepping stone to what the Prime Minister's talked about, and frankly what this country needs right now is to get back on the winning track and to start building things that are going to be with us and be fruitful for years to come. And, you know, as I was reading this, the best example I could have was being from Hamilton, Ontario, was our airport, Hamilton International Airport, John C. Monroe Hamilton International Airport, just in the south end of the city right now. We live in the shadow of Pearson, the biggest airport and one of the most productive airports, of course, in the Toronto area. But the investments that the federal government has made to Hamilton Airport over the years, and by conservative and liberal governments, to be fair, has turned this airport into an extremely productive economic tool for the city and for the province and frankly, for the country. Hamilton International Airport, of course, is the biggest cargo airport in the country, 24-hour service. And I know because the south end of the city where we are, I hear the jets coming day and night. And you know what? It doesn't bother me because I know what it is. That's money. That's business. And it's a common theme that we're going to talk about. Because, when the airport prospers, as Hamilton Airport has done, it, first of all, creates thousands of well-paying jobs right there, but more importantly, spin-off jobs, warehousing jobs, transportation jobs, things of this nature. It's all because of that investment that the government makes. And what Prime Minister Carney has been talking about is doing the exact same thing with some of these projects. And the nice thing about this is they're not starting with a blank sheet of paper here. We'll tell you just why in a second. But there's a common theme here, and I use the example of Hamilton Airport, I think, to underscore that. The word I want you to remember as we go through these, and as we go through the second series of proposals, which I guess are going to come, he said, before the Grey Cup, which would be the end of November, commerce. That's the word I want you to think of, commerce. All right? That's business, creating jobs. That's creating profitable businesses. That's creating money for the economy. That's creating a better municipal area for tax base, a better provincial tax base, a better federal tax base, and it goes towards things like cost of living. You can't afford a house if you don't have a job, a good paying job. If you've got goods movement, which is one of the things that the Prime Minister has talked about here, it makes for an efficient system. Right. And that's what we're shooting for here. We haven't always done a very good job of that. And I think what the Prime Minister has talked about here is we got to get back on track with that. And I think these projects go a long way toward that. Not everybody's happy about this, but I think they have to understand that this is a starting point, not the end of it. And I think when you look at this list, you get this idea. Basically, what they've talked about here in the first is liquefied natural gas terminal expansion, which is something that's extremely important right now. Critical mining projects and something to do with in the Port of Montreal that we'll get to in just a couple of seconds. I'm not an engineer, so I can't get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on here. But the LNG, liquid natural gas, is something that's key here. We know that in the early days of the Ukraine war, obviously Europe is being impacted by this because they sadly rely an awful lot of the time on Russia for their energy and for their fuel, and they don't want to do that. And the German chancellor at the time came over here and talked to then Prime Minister Trudeau, about trying to get LNG, but liquid natural gas over there. And basically Trudeau said, no, can't do it. Sorry. Too bad. Thanks for coming out. Carney has got a different tact. They're going to do something about this. There's an expansion going on with liquid natural gas and transporting it. First of all, as we know, it's already started that process by transferring some of the LNG to Asian markets, and we want to do the same thing for Europe. And we're not there yet, but the intention is there, and the infrastructure is being put in place for this to happen. So that's something that's going to pay off big time. All right? We can be an energy producer and an energy supplier to an awful lot more of the world than we are right now. And that's going to be something that's going to help us become less reliant on the United States. See, you connecting the dots now? That's what the Prime Minister is thinking about here. So this LNG project is huge. Natural resources. Canada is rich in natural resources. All right? That's why the orange crazy guy in the White House wants Canada to become the 51st state. It's not because he likes the trees and the pictures from up here. It's our natural resources he wants to get his hands on. Well, it's too bad, so sad, Donald. That's not happening. But the Prime Minister has put forth a couple of different projects right now, mining projects. They're going to go a long way towards that, including one in Saskatchewan and another one in British Columbia. And there's copper and other minerals that are being mined here that the world wants and that the world needs. And we've got to get them out of the ground, and we've got to make these available right now. And that's going to be happening with some of the stuff that they've talked about with these projects here. One of the courses in Quebec, a proposed expansion of the Montreal port. This is a little port that's about 40 kilometers rather. Let's get into the Canadian thing here, the metric system. 40 kilometers north of Montreal, and it's huge. The St. Lawrence Seaway is a huge economic driver for this country, and international trade and by sea is such a big part of that. But if we don't have the facilities, if you don't have the infrastructure, it's not going to happen. And we need to do that. And again, we've been laggard in this in the past. So this investment in the Montreal port is extremely important. Now, the Ontario project, I want to talk about in just a second here, because I think this is big. The mining projects in Saskatchewan and BC are huge because it's going to be a deliverer of a lot of raw materials that we can use, first of all, but we can also make available to other parts of the country. But I want to talk about swing back here because the Ontario project that's being included in the first five is the Darlington new nuclear project. And this is, we get into some of the nitty gritty on this right now. Nuclear energy, of course, is for the future, of course. And we understand that we in Ontario especially can be extremely, extremely important first of all, in Canadian energy consumption and production, but also North American and worldwide as well. And there's new technology that's coming out right now. It's called the small modular reactor. And again, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to get into the short stuff on this one. But it's billed as the future of nuclear production. And Darlington is being tagged as one of the areas where this is going to be developed. And from what we're told now, the numbers that I've seen here, when this all up and running, which is not going to be too far from now, it's talking about producing enough to power 300,000 homes. And of course, with that technology, we can sell the technology. It's not just the power you sell, it's how you do it. And that's something that we need to be doing in Canada. And Darlington's going to be a key part of that. Don't forget, for the politicians that aren't crazy about this and thought, they should have picked this project, or other people, the critics, who are some of them just critics because they want to be critics. If you want economic expansion, and if you even want more people living here and more homes built, you got to heat them. You got to be able to turn the lights on. And those businesses that you want to relocate here to Ontario or start in Ontario, whatever the case might be, they need power. And they don't want expensive power. We've seen governments, both provincial and federal, that have been hounded by industry saying, look, we're getting slaughtered here. One of the reasons a lot of them moved south or thought about moving south over the years is because they can get that kind of energy a lot more cheaply than they could here. Well, this kind of technology is going to go a long way towards solving that problem. This is big. Now, I know that here in Ontario, Premier Ford is not crazy about this. He doesn't think it's a bad idea because obviously Darlington's a major part of this, and I hope he understands why Dougie would rather us build that underground highway of his, which I think is a dumb idea myself. But that's not a job creator. It's a job creator for the people who are going to build it. Good for them. But there's no long-lasting thing here. What it's going to create is not really a strong economic argument right now. Yeah, there's going to be an awful lot of people working on those highway projects when and if they ever do that. But it's also going to lead to economic spread and more concerned with the cost of travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I don't want to get into the debate about that. We'll do that when they decide to actually put that one on the table. But right now, Darlington is important. Creating energy, expensive energy, off the table, affordable energy is what we want. And this project's going to do that. So it's a good way of looking at this to understand exactly where the government's going on this. Now, the really good news about this is not only are we getting the ball rolling right now with the first five, all of these five that we've just talked about here are not something that they're going to say, well, they're going to make the announcement and then 8 or 9 months from now, somebody will, they'll turn the sod at something and 5 or 6 years later, they might build a plant there. These are already they've already been approved. They've already gone through certain phases. The problem is, with red tape and technology and everything else, these things can get stalled. And what the government plans on doing with all of these very important projects is basically push these over the finish line. And as the Prime Minister said, yes, there may be some government assistance here, but the majority, the overwhelming majority, he says, of the investment here is going to come from the private sector. And then it's a win-win. Obviously, these projects get completed, but you don't have to wait for approval. They've already started the process for these 5. And for those that are saying, well, when is that going to get done? It's not going to get done. Yeah, it is. It's going to get done, and it's going to get a lot more quickly than we had thought, because the government's stepping up here, and they're going to be the catalyst for this to happen. And that's not to suggest, I guess, that all the projects that the government may be investing in over the next little while are going to be, 3/4 of the way done, or whatever the case might be. But it's a good way to get things going right off the bat. Remember, we talked about in previous podcasts that what this economy needs, and I think what Canadian people want to see, are some wins. We want to see, okay, we can check that box. He said he was going to do this, and bingo, there's the project that's going to do that. That port expansion is going to do that. What a great idea. And then we can see it right in front of our eyes. And we can understand that, okay, you can make that connection between here's the concept, here's the way they want to do it, and bingo, finished project, and we'll benefit from that. And there's more to come. I know that we've talked on the podcast about things like the Churchill port that Manitoba Premier Canoe had been talked about. Great idea. And the Prime Minister thinks it's a great idea. But there's still a lot of regulatory stuff that has to be done. So why would you earmark money for that that's going to sit there on the table until they go through that process, while you can spend that money someplace else and get an immediate return on it? It's smart politics, and it's smart business. And Canadian governments have not always tied those two things together. And it looks like this government and this Prime Minister is doing exactly that. And that's good news for all of us. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. Watching on YouTube, don't forget, hit that notification bell for us, would you? As we've mentioned, we have a new Blue Sky address. It's at Bill Kelly Podcast. So if you were with us on the previous podcast address, jump onto this one right now, at Bill Kelly Podcast. We look forward to renewing acquaintances with a lot of our podcast followers and our Blue Sky followers. So we're looking forward to hearing from you again. And as always, we look forward to your feedback on what's happening here too. And don't forget, by the way, hit the subscribe button. Lots going on here, and we just love to get the dialogue going. And your subscription and your support there is really going to help us to do that. Thanks as always to Madeline Kelly for the great work putting this one together. Until next time, I'm Bill Kelly. Stay in touch and stay informed.
Bill Kelly Podcast brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.